my contribution today, sir, and I thank you.
Aupito William Sio.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I joined the committee at the latter part end of it, as when this bill was coming to the latter part of the Select Committee's consideration. And generally speaking, I thought that in the main, the key parts of the bill are common sense changes which allow the government departments to better share information in order to avoid the similar case as the one mentioned by the previous speaker with regard to Philip John Smith. The only point that we raised then, and will continue to raise, it's a shame that it took something like the Philip John Smith case to highlight the gaps. There was another point, sir, that I want to table in this House, which were raised by many of the submitters, and that has to do with the information sharing between agencies. There were many submitters who submitted that in terms of the Part 10A and Schedule 4A, many submitters thought it was unnecessary as there was already approved information sharing agreements between agencies, and that was already available. And therefore, those submitters felt that by legislating for this, it actually gave much broader powers and broader potential, I suspect, for corrupt practices to occur if we did not have sufficient controls around the way that that information was shared. And I point that out, sir, because oftentimes from time to time, I get complaints mainly from the Muslim community who travel overseas, in particular when somebody in the family has died. You see, at our borders, we sort of collect that information, and when we see that somebody has paid for an airfare sort of the day before and by cash, that person becomes sort of suspicious in terms of the antennas of the border control, when in reality the reason why that would occur is in accordance with the Muslim faith. Once somebody dies, they've got to bury that person immediately within a certain time frame, and therefore there is no planning for those travels. It must be immediate, and it often requires, instead of using a credit card, most families would use cash in order to be at the airport quickly, fly to the family, bury their dead before the time frame runs out for that sort of happen. And when they return, they are then picked up at the border, and our border controls feel somewhat suspicious about the way that their travel was planned or lack of planning thereof. And so I raise that, sir, as one of the issues where when we give powers to the government agencies, particularly for collecting biometric information and for the controlling of travels for those who are on parole, often our systems seem to pick up people unnecessarily simply because of lack of information, or the information that has to do with their travel plans raises red flags at our borders. And so, but nonetheless, there was general support, I would say, by the committee, and I think many of the committee felt that they had provided an existing legislative frameworks for those approved information sharing agreements, and that believe that the matters listed in 4A could be achieved by having 6 approved information sharing agreements covering the information exchanges between the accessing agency and the holder agency. But notwithstanding, sir, I think as we move forward, and as we tend to give more powers to our government agencies, we do need to ensure that we have oversight of that, because what we've got to protect our reputation, sir, and so far we have an international reputation that is well formulated, one that established us to be very credible, established us as a country with high integrity, and so forth. And I would hate for any government, whether past or present, to sort of move into an area where we simply give massive, huge powers to government agencies to do this kind of work without any oversight, particularly when it comes to the sharing information where we value
Aupito
our
William
information. Thank you, Ms. Chair. I don't have very long to go. Where we value our own personal information and it can get caught up in the whole scheme of things and it's not necessarily those people that we're wanting to capture. And so in the report, requiring to report and identify what information sharing is occurring, I think that that's important, that we agree that a requirement to report on the operation of Schedule 4A would provide further accountability. However, the committee did not propose prescribing how reporting should take place, as this would ensure that agencies have sufficient flexibility to incorporate this process into their existing annual reports. Nonetheless, though the majority of the committee felt that agencies should have flexibility in reporting back, it's still important, sir, that I think that we have that oversight and that this House in particular needs to keep track of those particular reports on how that information is shared and who and which agencies are sharing, and any feedback from the general public about how they are treated. That's all I wanted to share with the House at this point in time.
Thank you. Mahi Spindra.
To stand on behalf of New Zealand First to speak.